The boarding pass wouldn't scan. I stood at the gate holding my phone forward like an offering, while the agent frowned at her screen, and behind me a line of travelers shuffled their feet with that specific impatience reserved for people who might miss their flight because someone else's technology failed. The agent finally looked up. "Ma'am, you've been selected for additional screening. You'll need to step aside." SASS printed across the bottom of my boarding pass in red letters I hadn't noticed before. 4 letters that meant I'd be the person holding up the line, patted down, bags emptied, while everyone else settled into their seats and judged me for whatever algorithm had flagged my name. I knew why, though I didn't say it out loud. 3 months ago, my son reported his old phone stolen. That phone had my travel details, my contact information, my home address. He'd texted me about it casually, said his apartment had been broken into, said he was fine, said he'd already changed his passwords. I'd asked if he'd called the police. He'd sent back a thumbs-up emoji. That was the extent of our conversation about it. And now here I was, being pulled aside at DIA because some system somewhere had connected dots that didn't need connecting. Sure, what could go wrong? The additional screening took 20 minutes. A tired TSA agent with kind eyes told me to remove my shoes again, my jacket, my belt. She patted down my sides with the backs of her hands, professional and apologetic. "Just procedure," she said. I smiled and told her I understood. I didn't tell her my son used to call me twice a week. I didn't tell her that now we communicated primarily through text messages that felt like customer service exchanges. I didn't tell her I was flying to Colorado to see his new house, a house I'd only learned about when he sent a photo of the front door with the caption, "Closed yesterday." No, "Wish you were here." No, "Can't wait to show you." Just a door, painted charcoal gray with brushed nickel hardware. On the plane, I texted him my landing time. He replied 6 minutes later, "See you then." I stared at the message. No safe flight. No looking forward to it. No use of my name, which I'd started tracking without meaning to. 4 months since he typed "mom" in a text. 7 months since he'd signed off with "love you." The messages had become transactional, informational, the kind of updates you'd give a landlord or a distant relative you felt obligated to keep informed. I put my phone in airplane mode and closed my eyes and told myself I was being dramatic. He was busy. He'd just bought a house. People got distracted by life. It didn't mean anything. Except it did. It meant something. The flight attendant came by with her cart, and I ordered a ginger ale I didn't want just to have something to hold. The man next to me was reading a thriller with the embossed skull on the cover. Across the aisle, a father was helping his adult son organize his carry-on, laughing about something, their heads bent together in easy conspiracy. I watched them and felt something twist behind my sternum. That used to be us. Road trips where we'd stop at every weird roadside attraction. Late-night phone calls when he was in college and couldn't sleep before exams. The year he'd had his wisdom teeth out and I'd stayed up with him, feeding him applesauce and watching nature documentaries at 3 a.m. When had that person, my son, my actual son, been replaced by this polite stranger who responded to my messages like I was his dentist's office confirming an appointment? Denver came into view through the window, sprawling and brown and edged by mountains that looked fake in their postcard perfection. I'd never been here before. My son had moved for work 2 years ago, and I'd visited him once in his old apartment, a cramped one-bedroom where we'd ordered Thai food, and he'd seemed nervous the entire time, checking his phone, cutting our evening short because he had an early morning. I hadn't been invited back, and now he owned a house, had bought a house, was building a life in a city I didn't know, among people I'd never met, in routines I couldn't picture. The rental car smelled like artificial pine and someone else's French fries. I adjusted the seat and the mirrors and pulled up the address he'd texted me weeks ago, 42 minutes to his place. I drove through suburbs that all looked the same, Target, Chipotle, developments with names like Harmony Ridge and Sage Creek. The houses were new, beige, packed close together with xeriscaped front yards and 2-car garages. I tried to picture my son here and couldn't. He'd grown up in a town where everyone knew everyone, where the coffee shop owner remembered his order, where you couldn't go to the grocery store without running into 3 people you knew. This place was anonymous, clean, the kind of place where you could live for years and never learn your neighbor's name. I rehearsed greetings in my head. Keep it light, keep it easy. Don't ask why he hasn't called. Don't mention the months of silence. Don't be the mother who makes everything about her feelings. Just be happy for him. Be proud. Smile and tour the house and say all the right things, and ignore the fact that your chest feels tight and your hands are shaking slightly on the steering wheel. His street was called Riverwalk Lane, though I saw no river. The houses were modern, boxy, with metal accents and oversized windows. I pulled up to number 847 and sat in the car for a moment, engine off, staring at the front door. Charcoal gray, just like the photo. A woman's bike leaned against the porch rail, turquoise with a wicker basket bungeed to the handlebars. The basket was full of reusable canvas bags from a farmer's market, vegetables poking out the top. Kale, maybe. Carrots with the greens still attached. I hadn't known he was seeing anyone. The door opened before I reached it. My son stood there in dark jeans and a canvas apron I'd never seen, the kind with leather straps that cost too much and came from stores that sold artisanal dish soap. He smiled, small, controlled, and stepped forward for a hug. One arm. Brief. The kind of hug you'd give a coworker at a retirement party. "You made it," he said. Not, "I'm so glad you're here." Not, "I missed you." Just acknowledgement of my arrival, the way you'd confirm a package delivery. "I did," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Traffic wasn't bad." "Good, good." He held the door open and gestured me inside. "Come in, I'll give you the tour." The entryway was all light wood and white walls and a console table that looked Danish and expensive. A framed print hung above it, abstract, geometric, in muted blues and grays. The kind of art that said nothing and cost everything. I set my bag down and followed him into the open-concept living space, and that's when she appeared. She came from the kitchen barefoot, wearing jeans and a linen top that probably had words like sustainable and ethically sourced in its product description. Dark hair pulled into a low bun. Warm smile. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and extended one toward me. "You must be Mom," she said. "I'm Elena. It's so wonderful to finally meet you." Finally, as if I'd been the one delaying this. I shook her hand. "It's nice to meet you, too." I looked at my son, who was suddenly very interested in straightening a picture frame that didn't need straightening. "I didn't know." I started, then stopped. "Didn't know you were seeing someone. Didn't know you'd moved someone into your house. Didn't know I was meeting your girlfriend on the same trip where I was seeing your house for the first time. I didn't know you had a roommate." I finished, which was cowardly but easier. Elena laughed, a genuine sound, and glanced at my son with affection that made my stomach drop. "Partner, actually. We've been together about 1.5 years. 18 months. He'd been with someone for 18 months and hadn't mentioned her. Not once. Not in any of our brief transactional text exchanges. Not in the 2 phone calls we'd managed in the past year, both of which he'd ended after less than 10 minutes. "That's wonderful," I said and meant it, and also didn't. "Congratulations?" My son finally looked at me. "I'll show you around," he said. The tour felt like an open house showing. My son walked through each room narrating square footage and Energy Star ratings, his voice taking on the practiced cadence of someone who'd explained these features before. Quartz countertops, low VOC paint throughout. The HVAC system is zoned so we can control the temperature in different areas. We. He kept saying we, but the pronoun felt hollow, performative, as if he were trying on a life that didn't quite fit yet. Or maybe it fit perfectly, and I was the one who didn't belong in it. The living room had a sectional in charcoal gray, throw pillows in mustard and cream, a coffee table made from reclaimed wood with a price tag I could guess at. Everything matched. Everything looked like it had been staged for a magazine shoot. There were plants, a fiddle-leaf fig by the window, succulents on floating shelves, but no photographs. No books with broken spines, no mess, no history. "The light in here is incredible in the morning," Elena said, coming up beside us with a glass of water she handed to me without asking if I wanted it. "We have coffee on the deck most days, before work." Most days. They had routines. They had a life that hummed along in patterns I knew nothing about. "It's beautiful," I said, because it was. "You've done a wonderful job." My son led me upstairs. 2 bedrooms, 2 baths. The master had a king bed with a linen duvet and more of those expensive pillows that were somehow both firm and soft. The bathroom had a rainfall showerhead and subway tile and one of those modern floating vanities. We went back and forth on the tile, he said, and I realized he was nervous. His hands kept moving, adjusting a hand towel, straightening a bottle of lotion on the counter. Elena wanted white, I wanted gray. We compromised on this warm gray. "It's perfect," I said. I meant it. I also wanted to ask when he'd learned to care about tile colors, when he'd become the kind of person who had opinions about grout lines and fixture finishes. The son I remembered had lived in a college apartment with furniture scrounged from alley finds and a bathroom that probably violated health codes. But that was 6 years ago. People changed, people grew up, people became strangers. The guest room was at the end of the hall. "This is you," he said, opening the door onto a space that looked like a boutique hotel. White walls, gray headboard, a quilted throw blanket folded geometrically at the foot of the bed. On the nightstand, a carafe of water with a glass turned upside down over it, a small lamp, a card with the Wi-Fi password printed in elegant script. On the dresser, a wicker basket filled with travel-sized toiletries. Shampoo, conditioner, lotion, mouthwash. All the same brand, all arranged like a gift basket you'd give someone you barely knew. "If you need anything, just let us know," my son said. Us. "Bathroom's across the hall. Towels are in the cabinet under the sink." "This is lovely," I said. "Thank you." He nodded and backed toward the door. "Dinner's almost ready. Come down whenever you're settled." He left. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room that had been prepared for me like I was a guest at a bed and breakfast. Everything thoughtful. Everything impersonal. I pulled out my phone and opened our text thread and scrolled back through months of messages. His replies got shorter as I went back in time. My messages got longer. I could see myself trying harder, asking more questions, offering more details about my life that he never asked about. The shift had started about 2 years ago, right after I'd questioned his decision to leave his job at the nonprofit for corporate work. I'd said something like, "Are you sure that's what you want?" And he'd gone quiet for 3 weeks. When he finally responded, everything had changed. The warmth was gone. The ease was gone. I'd become someone he managed rather than someone he talked to. I set the phone down and went to the window. The backyard was small, fenced, with a deck and a gas grill and 2 Adirondack chairs positioned to face the sunset. Beyond the fence, more houses just like this one stretched toward the foothills. I wondered which of those houses held families who actually knew each other, who gathered for holidays and called just to talk, and didn't communicate primarily through thumbs-up emojis. Dinner was already on the table when I came downstairs. Elena had made a curry, yellow, fragrant, served over jasmine rice, with a side of roasted vegetables. It looked restaurant quality. My son was pouring wine, white, into stemless glasses that probably came from the same store as the apron. "I hope you like curry," Elena said, settling into her chair. I should have asked about dietary restrictions. "It looks amazing," I said, and it did. I took a bite. The heat hit immediately, a slow-building fire that spread across my tongue and down my throat. I reached for my water, took a long drink, smiled. Delicious. Elena beamed. My son said nothing. He knew I couldn't handle spicy food, had known since I was a kid myself and couldn't eat my grandmother's chili without crying. He'd ordered mild his entire childhood to keep me company, had made a game of finding restaurants with sensitive palate options, and now he sat there cutting his chicken, silent, while I drank water between bites and pretended my eyes weren't watering. The conversation moved around me. Elena talked about her work at a nonprofit that did something with urban farming and food access. My son asked her about a grant application, and she launched into details about funding cycles and stakeholder meetings. They were easy together, finishing each other's sentences, referencing inside jokes I didn't understand. "Remember when Marcus brought those samples to the board meeting?" Elena said, laughing, and my son grinned. Actually grinned, a real smile I hadn't seen in years, and said, "The beets. God, the beets." I sat there eating curry that burned my mouth and watched them be happy together and felt like I was observing my son's life through soundproof glass. "So, you two are traveling soon?" I asked during a lull, because Elena had mentioned something about flights. "Oh, yes," Elena lit up. "We're going to Costa Rica for 2 weeks. My family has a place near Tamarindo. My mom's been begging us to visit." "That sounds wonderful," I said. When do you leave?" "November 18th, my son said. He was looking at his plate. "November 18th. 2 days before Thanksgiving." I put my fork down. Carefully. "That's Thanksgiving week?" "Yeah." He still wasn't looking at me. "Elena's family doesn't really do Thanksgiving, so we figured it was a good time to go." We'd had Thanksgiving together every year of his life. Every single year. Even in college, even when he was broke and had to take 2 buses to get home, he'd come. Last year, I'd asked if he was coming, and he'd said probably not, said he had to work, and I'd spent the day with my sister and her family and pretended it was fine. And now here he was, planning a trip to Costa Rica during Thanksgiving, like it was just another week on the calendar. "That'll be nice," I said. My voice sounded normal, steady. "I'm sure you'll have a great time." His phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, silenced it, but not before I saw the contact name, Mom E., Elena's mother. Saved with the same label he used to use for me back when he saved my contact as Mom and called me just to tell me about his day. I excused myself to get more water. In the kitchen, I stood at the sink and gripped the counter and breathed slowly through my nose. The faucet had one of those pull-down sprayers with multiple settings. The dish soap was in a glass dispenser with a brass pump. Everything was so deliberately chosen, so carefully curated, and none of it had anything to do with me. When I came back to the table, my son was refilling Elena's wine glass. "I was just telling Elena about that trip we took to Yellowstone," he said. "When was that? Like 10 years ago?" 12, I said. "You were 16. "Right." He nodded. "That was a good trip." That was it. That was all he said. A good trip. Not, "Remember when we saw that bear?" or "Remember when we got lost, trying to find Old Faithful?" or any of the 100 specific memories I could have pulled from that week. Just a good trip, summarized and filed away, offered up like evidence that we had a history even if we didn't have a present. Elena offered me more curry. I declined, said I was full, helped clear the plates. My son retreated to his office for a quick work call that I knew wouldn't be quick. Elena and I stood at the sink together, her washing, me drying. She talked about the house hunting process, how many places they'd looked at, how they'd almost given up before finding this one. "It's been such a journey," she said, "but I think we're really building something special here." Building, present tense, ongoing. And I was visiting the construction site like a tourist, allowed to look but not touch, welcome but not needed. "He doesn't talk about you much," Elena said suddenly, her hands stilling in the soapy water. "I don't mean that in a bad way. He just keeps things pretty private, but I know this visit means a lot to him." I didn't believe her, but I appreciated the lie. "I'm glad to be here," I said. She smiled, and I could see why my son liked her. She was kind, earnest. The type of person who probably rescued injured birds and composted religiously and believed that people were fundamentally good if you just gave them a chance. She was exactly the kind of person I'd want my son to be with, if I'd been given the chance to want anything at all. We finished the dishes. My son emerged from his office, apologized for the call running long, asked if I wanted to watch something. I said I was tired from the flight. He said that made sense. Elena mentioned they had an early morning hike planned. I said I hoped they'd have good weather. No one invited me along. The guest room was quiet in the way hotel rooms are quiet. Insulated, sealed off, absent of the small sounds that make a house feel lived in. I changed into the pajamas I'd packed and sat on the edge of the bed that was neither too soft nor too firm, and I understood that this room had been designed for temporary occupancy, for guests who would arrive, sleep, and leave without leaving any trace of themselves behind. I couldn't sleep. The pillow was the wrong height. The duvet was too warm. The darkness was too complete, no familiar shadows on the ceiling, no ambient noise from the street I'd learned to sleep through over 30 years in the same house. I picked up my phone and opened our text thread again, even though I'd already read through it twice today. I scrolled back further this time, past the recent transactional exchanges, past the gradual cooling, all the way back to 3 years ago when the messages were still warm. Him. "Just got back from the farmer's market. Got those apples you like. Wish you were here to make a pie." Me. "Save me some. I'll come visit and we'll make one together." Him. "Deal. Love you." Me. "Love you too, honey." That son, the one who thought of me at farmers markets, who associated apples with my pies, who signed off with "love you," where had he gone? I scrolled forward month by month, watching the decline in real time. The messages got shorter, the personal details disappeared. My questions went unanswered or were answered with the bare minimum, and my messages got longer, more desperate, trying to fill the silence with updates he hadn't asked for, questions he didn't want to answer, a one-sided conversation I kept having because the alternative was admitting we didn't have a relationship anymore. The shift had a clear starting point. 2 years ago, almost exactly, he'd called to tell me he was leaving the nonprofit where he'd worked since college, taking a job at a tech company. Better pay, better benefits, a title that sounded impressive but vague. I'd asked if it was what he really wanted if he'd missed the mission-driven work. I'd said, "Are you sure this is right for you?" And he'd said, "Why do you always do this?" And I'd said, "Do what?" And he'd said, "Question my decisions. Act like I don't know what I'm doing." And I'd said I wasn't questioning, I was just checking in, just making sure. And he'd said, "I'm 30 years old, Mom. I don't need you to make sure." We'd hung up tense. He hadn't called back. 3 weeks of silence. When he finally texted, it was about something mundane, a package that had been delivered to my address by mistake. I'd tried to talk about the fight, to apologize if I'd overstepped, to explain that I just worried. He'd said it was fine. But it wasn't fine. Everything changed after that call. I became someone he managed, someone he gave updates to out of obligation, someone who existed at the periphery of his life rather than at the center. From down the hall, I heard laughter. Muffled, intimate, coming from my son's bedroom. Elena said something I couldn't make out, and my son laughed in response, a real laugh, unguarded and full. I hadn't heard him laugh like that in years. Not with me, not once. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. The guest room ceiling, smooth and white and anonymous. I thought about all the times I'd imagined visiting him, back when he first moved to Colorado. I'd pictured us hiking together, trying new restaurants, sitting up late, talking the way we used to. I'd pictured him showing me his favorite spots in his new city, eager to share his life with me. I'd pictured him happy to see me, not just accepting of my presence. Instead, I was here, in a house that felt like a museum of a life I wasn't part of, listening to my son laugh with someone who knew him better in 18 months than I'd known him in the past 2 years. The light from under the door went dark. Silence settled over the house. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep and failed and tried again. Morning arrived with sunlight through the plantation shutters and the smell of coffee brewing downstairs. I lay there for a moment, disoriented, then remembered where I was. Guest room, my son's house. Colorado. I checked my phone. 7:43. No messages. I dressed and went downstairs. My son and Elena were in the kitchen, both wearing athletic clothes, filling water bottles and packing snacks into small backpacks. The coffee maker was on, a full pot waiting, but no one had set out mugs or asked if I wanted any. "Morning," I said. They both turned. "Oh, hey," my son said. "Did you sleep okay?" "Great," I lied. "The bed's very comfortable." "Good, good." He zipped his backpack. "So we're heading out for a hike. There's this trail up near Golden that's supposed to be incredible this time of year. We should be back by early afternoon." Not, "Do you want to come?" Not, "We'd love for you to join us." Just we, a unit of 2, with plans that didn't include me. "That sounds lovely," I said. "I'll just hang out here, maybe explore the neighborhood a bit." "There's a coffee shop about a mile down if you want to walk," Elena offered. "Called Crema. They have great pastries." "Perfect," I said. "I'll check it out." My son looked almost relieved. "Great. So we'll see you later then. Help yourself to anything in the fridge." They left through the garage door, and I heard the car start and back out of the driveway. The house fell silent. I poured myself coffee in a mug that said "Good vibes only," and stood at the kitchen window looking out of the backyard with its perfect deck and its perfect chairs and its perfect emptiness. I walked through the house slowly, room by room, the way you'd walk through a museum after hours when no one was watching. I wasn't snooping exactly, just looking. Trying to find any trace of the person I'd raised, any evidence that the son I knew still existed somewhere underneath the stranger who'd given me a one-armed hug and narrated appliance warranties. The living room revealed nothing. No photos on the walls, no personal items on the shelves. Just plants and art books and a succulent arrangement that probably had its own watering schedule. The kitchen had a chalkboard menu hanging by the pantry, this week's dinners written in Elena's looping script. Monday, sheet pan chicken. Tuesday, pasta primavera. Wednesday, leftover night. Nothing about Thursday, which was today, which was me. Upstairs, I stood in the doorway of my son's bedroom without going in. The bed was made, navy duvet pulled tight, pillows arranged. On the nightstand on what I guessed was Elena's side, a stack of books, a small succulent, a framed photo of the two of them at what looked like a trail summit, both smiling, wind-blown, happy. On his side, a lamp, a phone charger, nothing else. I tried to remember what had been on his nightstand growing up. A rotating collection of library books, a lava lamp, a shoebox full of ticket stubs and coins and other small treasures. All of that was gone. Grown out of, moved past. I went back downstairs and stood in the living room, feeling like an intruder in my own son's life. The house was beautiful. The house was perfect. The house had nothing to do with me. My coffee had gone cold. I poured it out and rinsed the mug and put it in the dishwasher. Then I got my shoes and my jacket and went out the front door, pulling it closed behind me with a soft click that felt final somehow. The neighborhood was quiet, the morning stillness broken only by a distant lawnmower and the sound of wind chimes from someone's porch. I walked without direction, past houses that all looked similar, past manicured yards and two-car garages and lives I knew nothing about. At the end of the street, I found a small park, just a playground and a loop trail around a retention pond. I sat on a bench and watched ducks glide across the water and thought about the guest room with its hotel toiletries and its printed Wi-Fi password. My son had built a life here, a good life, by all appearances. He had a house and a partner and routines and plans. He had inside jokes and favorite restaurants and a contact in his phone labeled Mom E. He had everything a 30-year-old was supposed to have. He was doing everything right, and I didn't fit into any of it. The realization settled over me slowly, heavy and cold. I wasn't essential to his life anymore. Maybe I hadn't. Been for a while. Maybe that phone call 2 years ago hadn't been the turning point, but just the moment when we both stopped pretending. He didn't need me to make sure anymore. He didn't need me at all. And somewhere along the way, I'd become someone he tolerated rather than someone he loved. Someone he managed rather than someone he chose. I sat on that bench for a long time, watching the ducks and trying to figure out when I'd lost him and whether there was ever a version of this story where I got him back. My phone buzzed. A text from my son. Hope you're finding stuff to do. We'll probably grab lunch on the way back. Should be home by 3. I read it twice. Looked for something I could respond to, some opening for connection. Found nothing. Sounds good. Take your time. I hit send and stood up and walked back to the house that wasn't mine and would never be mine, and I made a decision. I had 2 more days here. 2 more days of being a guest in my son's life, and I wasn't going to spend them begging for scraps of his attention or performing the role of grateful mother who was just so happy to be included. I wasn't going to shrink myself or make myself easier or pretend I didn't notice how completely I'd been erased from his daily existence. I was going to meet him where he was, not where I wanted him to be, not where I remembered him being, where he actually was right now, in this moment. And if that meant we were just polite acquaintances who happened to share DNA, then that's what we'd be. At least it would be honest. I let myself back into the house and went upstairs to the guest room and sat on the edge of the perfectly made bed. The air smelled like the lavender sachet someone had tucked into the pillowcase. Everything was so carefully considered, so thoughtfully prepared, so entirely devoid of love. I pulled out my phone and looked at flights home. There were seats available tomorrow afternoon. I could cut the visit short, claim a work emergency or a burst pipe, or any of the 100 excuses people use to extract themselves from uncomfortable situations. I could be back in my own house, my own bed, my own life by tomorrow evening, but that felt like giving up, like admitting defeat, like letting the distance win. I put the phone away and lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling and waited for my son to come home from a hike I hadn't been invited on, and I practiced the smile I'd wear when he walked through the door. Warm, but not desperate. Present, but not intrusive. The smile of someone who'd accepted her place in the margins of her son's life and had decided that was enough, even though it wasn't, even though it would never be. They came back at 3:17, wind-blown and sun-flushed, and carrying takeout bags that smelled like barbecue. I was sitting on the back deck with a book I'd found on their shelf. Something about sustainable architecture that I wasn't actually reading, and I heard the garage door open, heard their voices. Carrying through the house, heard Elena laugh at something my son said. I waited. Gave them a moment to settle. Then I went inside. Hey, my son said. He was unpacking pulled pork sandwiches onto plates. We brought you lunch. Wasn't sure if you'd eaten. That's thoughtful, I said. Thank you. We sat at the kitchen island, the 3 of us on bar stools that were slightly too tall, eating sandwiches that were slightly too messy. Elena told me about the hike, the overlook, the family of marmots they'd seen sunning themselves on rocks. My son pulled up photos on his phone, swiped through images of golden aspens and distant peaks and one of Elena midlaff, her hair caught in the wind. He showed me that one without commentary, just a quick flash before moving to the next landscape shot, but I'd seen it. The way he'd captured her. The fact that he'd been taking photos at all. "It's beautiful up there," I said, because it was and because someone needed to fill the silence. "We should go back before the snow," Elena said to my son. "Maybe do that longer loop we talked about." "Yeah, definitely." He took a bite of his sandwich, caught a drip of sauce with his napkin. "So, Mom, what do you want to do while you're here? We were thinking maybe we could show you around Denver tomorrow. There's this cool arts district, some good restaurants." It was an offering, an attempt. I could hear the effort in his voice, the way he was trying to be a good host, a good son, whatever version of those things he thought he should be, and I appreciated it. I did. But I also knew it would be another tour, another narration of a life I wasn't part of, another few hours of polite conversation that skimmed the surface of everything that mattered. "That sounds nice," I said, "but honestly, I'm fine doing my own thing. I know you both have work and routines. I don't want to disrupt everything." Elena jumped in immediately. "You're not disrupting anything. We want to spend time with you." She meant it. I could tell. She was genuinely trying to include me, to bridge whatever gap she sensed between my son and me, but the gap wasn't hers to bridge. It wasn't something that could be fixed with a trip to an arts district or a nice dinner. It was years deep. It was a phone call 2 years ago that never got resolved. It was 18 months of not mentioning a girlfriend. It was Mom E. saved in his contacts. It was the accumulation of 1,000 small rejections that had hardened into something neither of us knew how to crack. "I appreciate that," I said. "But really, I'm happy to explore on my own. I saw there's a botanical garden. Maybe I'll check that out." My son looked relieved. Just a flicker, quickly hidden, but I caught it. He didn't want to spend the day with me any more than I wanted to spend it performing closeness we didn't have. "The botanical gardens are great," Elena said. "Very peaceful." We finished our sandwiches. Elena went upstairs to take a work call. My son loaded the dishwasher with the precision of someone who'd been told there was a right way to do it. I watched him arrange the plates in their designated slots, the silverware sorted by type in the basket, and I thought about all the times I'd loaded our dishwasher at home while he did his homework at the kitchen table, talking to me about his day, about his friends, about whatever was on his mind. Those conversations had been easy, formless. He'd trusted me with his thoughts back then. "This is a nice house," I said, because the silence was becoming obvious. "Yeah, we got lucky." He closed the dishwasher and started it, then leaned against the counter. "The market here is insane. We were outbid on 3 other places before this one." "Elena seems wonderful," I said. "She is." Something in his face softened. "She's the most genuinely good person I've ever met. Like, annoyingly good. She stops to help people carry groceries. She donates to every GoFundMe she sees. It's ridiculous." He smiled when he said it, real affection. The kind I hadn't seen directed at me in years. "I'm glad you found her," I said. "I'm glad you're happy." He nodded, looked at me, looked away. "I should have told you about her sooner. He stopped, started again. It felt easier to keep things separate. Separate. There it was. The word that explained everything. His life here, in Colorado, with Elena and his house and his routines, that was separate from me, from the past, from the version of himself he used to be. "I understand," I said, and I did. I didn't like it, but I understood. "Do you?" He was looking at me now, really looking, and there was something in his eyes I couldn't quite read. Guilt, maybe, or defensiveness, or just exhaustion. "Because I feel like every time we talk there's this weight, like you're waiting for me to be someone I'm not anymore." The words hit like a slap. I kept my face neutral. "I'm not waiting for anything," I said quietly. "I'm just trying to know who you are now." "I'm the same person." "Are you?" The question sat between us. He didn't answer. From upstairs, Elena's voice carried down, professional and warm, talking about deliverables and timelines. My son pushed off the counter, ran a hand through his hair. "I have some work to finish up," he said. "Make yourself at home." "Really?" He left. I stood in his kitchen with its quartz countertops and its zoned HVAC, and I wondered what make yourself at home meant when you were standing in a stranger's house. That evening, Elena made pasta, something with burrata and tomatoes and basil she'd grown on the deck. My son opened wine. We ate in the dining nook off the kitchen, and Elena asked me about my work, my hobbies, my friends. She asked good questions, follow-up questions, the kind that indicated she was actually listening. My son ate and nodded along and said very little. He'd always been quiet, even as a kid, but this was different. This was absence. He was physically present but mentally elsewhere, going through the motions of a family dinner without any of the warmth that made it mean something. After dinner, Elena suggested a board game. We played something European and complicated with resource management and trading. Elena won handily. My son came in second. I came in last by a margin that suggested I hadn't understood the rules as well as I'd thought. We laughed about it, or they laughed, and I joined in. And for a moment it almost felt easy, almost felt like I was part of something. Then my son's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and stood up. "I should take this," he said, and walked out onto the deck, closing the door behind him. Elena and I packed up the game in silence. I could see him through the glass, pacing, one hand in his pocket. His face was animated. He was smiling. Whoever was on the other end of that call, they got the version of him I didn't anymore. "He's been stressed with work," Elena said suddenly. "I know he seems distant. It's not about you." But it was. We both knew it was. "He's lucky to have you," I said. She smiled, sad and knowing. "I think there's stuff between you two that I don't understand. And that's okay. It's not my place. But for what it's worth, he talks about you sometimes. About growing up. About trips you took. He remembers more than you think." Remembers. Past tense. As if our relationship was something that existed only in history. My son came back inside, apologized for the call, suggested we watch a movie. We settled on something we'd all seen before, a safe choice that required no investment. I sat on one end of the sectional. They sat on the other, Elena's legs draped over my son's lap, his hand resting on her ankle. They looked comfortable. They looked right together. And I looked like exactly what I was, a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. Halfway through the movie, my eyes grew heavy. I excused myself, said goodnight, climbed the stairs to the guest room with its hotel basket and its printed Wi-Fi password. I brushed my teeth with the travel toothpaste they'd provided. I changed into my pajamas and climbed into the bed that was neither too soft nor too firm. And I lay there in the dark, listening to the muffled sound of the movie through the floor. And I thought about Elena's words. He remembers more than you think. But memory wasn't the same as presence. Memory was a photograph album you looked at occasionally, nostalgic and distant. Presence was showing up, calling, including, choosing someone over and over again, not because you had to, but because you wanted to. And my son had stopped choosing me. I thought about the flight I'd looked at earlier. Tomorrow afternoon, I could be home by evening. Back to my life, my routines, my world where I wasn't constantly reminded of my own irrelevance. It would be easier, kinder even. I wouldn't have to spend another day pretending this was a normal visit, pretending we were a normal family, pretending I didn't notice how badly he wanted me to leave, but something in me resisted. Some stubborn part that said I'd come all this way, I should at least try. Try to what, though? Try to talk to him? Try to fix what was broken? Try to force a connection he clearly didn't want? Or maybe just try to accept what was. Accept that this was our relationship now. Accept that he'd grown into someone I didn't quite know, and that was allowed, and I didn't get a vote. I fell asleep thinking about the ducks at the retention pond, the way they glided across the surface with no visible effort, as if moving through water was the easiest thing in the world. Act 5. Morning came with the sound of rain against the windows. I woke disoriented again, then remembered. Last day. I was leaving tomorrow, flying back to a home that would feel emptier than it had before, because now I knew exactly what I was missing, and exactly how little it mattered. I dressed and went downstairs. My son was already gone. Early meeting, according to the note on the counter. Elena was at the dining table with her laptop. Video call in progress, gesturing animatedly to someone on the screen. She saw me and waved, mouthed, "Coffee's ready." I poured a cup and took it to the back deck. The rain was light misty, the kind that seemed to hang in the air rather than fall. The chairs were wet. I stood under the overhang and watched water beat on the metal railing, and I thought about what I was going to say when my son got home. Because I was going to say something. Not to fix things. I'd accepted that couldn't be fixed. Not in a weekend, maybe not ever. But to at least be honest. To at least stop pretending. Elena finished her call around 10 and came outside with her own coffee. "Sorry about that," she said. "Funding meetings, never ending. Don't apologize, I know you both have work." She leaned against the railing beside me. We stood there in companionable silence for a moment. Then she said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What was he like as a kid?" I looked at her. She was watching me with genuine curiosity, the kind that comes from loving someone and wanting to understand all the pieces of them. "Quiet," I said. "Thoughtful. He used to collect rocks. Not cool rocks, just regular ones, but he'd give each one a name and a backstory. He had a whole society of rocks in a shoebox under his bed." Elena smiled. "That's very him." He was sensitive. He'd cry at movies, at songs on the radio. He felt things deeply. Too deeply, sometimes. I paused. I used to worry about that. About how much the world would hurt him. "Does he still cry at movies?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I haven't watched a movie with him in years." The words hung there. Elena looked away, out at the rain-soaked yard. "He loves you," she said quietly. "I know it doesn't feel like it. But he does." "Love's not enough sometimes," I said. "You can love someone and still not want them in your life." She didn't argue, just nodded like I'd confirmed something she'd suspected. My son came home around noon, shaking the rain from his jacket. He looked tired, stressed. He saw me in the kitchen and managed a smile. "Hey, sorry about this morning. Work's been insane." "I understand. What do you want to do today? We could still drive into Denver, or we could just hang here. Whatever you want." Whatever I want. As if he'd given me what I wanted at any point during this visit. "Actually," I said, "I was hoping we could talk, just the two of us." His face shuddered. "About what?" "Nothing bad, I promise. Just talk." He glanced at Elena, who was suddenly very interested in something on her phone. "Okay," he said. "Yeah. Let me just change out of these work clothes." He went upstairs. Elena gave me an encouraging nod and disappeared into the office. I stood in the kitchen and rehearsed what I wanted to say and tried not to let my hands shake. When my son came back down, he suggested we sit in the living room. We took opposite ends of the sectional, the same positions we'd been in for the movie last night, a cushion of space between us that felt symbolic. "So," he said, "what's up?" Where to start? How to start? I looked at him, really looked at him, and tried to see past the stranger he'd become to the child I'd raised. He was in there somewhere. The boy who'd named rocks and cried at movies and called me just to tell me about his day. "I'm not here to make you feel guilty," I said. "I want to start with that. I'm not here to make you feel bad or to tell you you're doing something wrong." "Okay." He was guarded, arms crossed, already defending himself against an attack I wasn't planning. "I just want to understand," I said. "I want to understand what happened between us, because something did happen, and I don't think we've ever actually talked about it." He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "You want to talk about the phone call?" "Is that what this is about? The job thing?" "It's not about the job." He ran a hand through his hair. "It's about the pattern. You questioning my decisions, you treating me like I'm still 17 and don't know what I'm doing. I stopped. Because maybe I had. Maybe in trying to be a good mother, in trying to make sure he was okay, I'd crossed a line I hadn't meant to cross. I was just worried about you. I know, but I'm 30. I don't need you to worry about me anymore. I need you to trust that I can make my own choices." "I do trust you." "Do you?" He leaned forward. "Because every time I make a decision you don't agree with, I can hear it in your voice. The doubt. Are you sure? It's exhausting. And after that call 2 years ago, I needed space. I needed to figure out my life without feeling like I had to justify every choice to you." The words hurt because they were true. I had questioned him. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I couldn't stop being his mother, couldn't stop wanting to protect him from making mistakes. But in trying to protect him, I'd pushed him away. "I'm sorry," I said. I didn't realize. I thought I was helping. I know you did. His face softened slightly, but it wasn't helping. It was suffocating. We sat with that. The rain picked up outside, drumming harder against the windows. I thought about all the texts I'd sent, all the questions I'd asked, all the times I'd tried to be part of his life and never noticed how badly he wanted me to step back. So what now? I asked. Do we just not talk? Is that easier? I don't know. He looked miserable. I don't want to hurt you, but I also don't know how to have you in my life without feeling like I'm constantly being evaluated. That's not. I stopped again. Because maybe that's exactly what I'd been doing. Evaluating. Measuring him against some version of success or happiness I decided was right. Never just accepting him as he was. I'm going to try to do better, I said. I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I'll try to just listen. To not question every choice. To let you live your life without commentary from the peanut gallery. He almost smiled at that. Almost. I'd appreciate that. But I need you to try too, I said. Because this... I gestured at the space between us, at the guest room upstairs, at everything that had happened this weekend. This isn't sustainable. If we're going to have a relationship, it has to be a real one. Not texts about flight times and thumbs up emojis. Not me being a stranger in your life. You're not a stranger. Aren't I? I kept my voice gentle. You didn't tell me about Elena for 18 months. You're spending Thanksgiving in Costa Rica, and you told me like you were announcing a dentist appointment. You saved her mother's contact as Mommy. I'm not saying any of that to make you feel bad. I'm saying it because it's true. And if that's where we are, if that's what you need, then okay. But I need to know. Because I can't keep showing up to a relationship that doesn't exist. He stared at his hands. I watched him struggle with something, guilt, resentment, grief, maybe all three. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. I didn't know how to tell you about Elena, he said quietly. I didn't know how to tell you about any of it, because every time I tried to share something, it felt like I had to defend it. Why this person? Why this city? Why this choice? And I just got tired. So I stopped sharing. That's fair, I said. That's completely fair. And I'm sorry I made you feel that way. And the Thanksgiving thing, he wiped at his eyes impatiently. I didn't think you'd care. Why wouldn't I care? Because you have your sister? You have your friends? I thought you'd be fine. I would have been fine, I said. But that doesn't mean I wouldn't have cared. We sat there, both of us crying a little, both of us holding pieces of a broken thing and not quite knowing how to put it. Back together. Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. I don't want to lose you, I said finally, but I also can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. So maybe we start over. Maybe we figure out what a real relationship looks like between us now, as the people we actually are, not the people we used to be. I'd like that, he said. His voice cracked slightly. I miss you. I miss talking to you. I just don't know how to do it without it feeling heavy. Then we practice, I said. We try. And when I overstep, you tell me. And when you shut me out, I tell you. And we both try to do better. He nodded, wiped his eyes again. Yeah, okay. We sat there a little longer, the weight between us not gone, but different somehow. Lighter, or maybe just more honest. Elena appeared in the doorway, tentative. Sorry to interrupt, just wanted to check if anyone wanted lunch. I could eat, my son said, his voice rough. Me too, I said. She smiled, relieved, and disappeared back into the kitchen. My son stood and offered me his hand. I took it, and he pulled me up, and for just a moment we were standing close enough that I could smell his shampoo, different from the one he'd used growing up, something woodsy and expensive, and I felt the full weight of how much he'd changed and how much I'd missed. I really am glad you're here, he said. I am too. We ate sandwiches at the kitchen island, the three of us, and the conversation flowed easier than it had all weekend. Elena told a story about a community garden disaster involving an escaped goat. My son laughed and I laughed, and for a while we were just three people sharing a meal. That evening, my son suggested we go to the botanical gardens together, all three of us. We walked through rain-fresh paths, past late-season roses and ornamental grasses bent heavy with water. Elena and my son walked ahead, and I let them, content to follow and observe and be present without needing to be central. At one point, my son turned back and waited for me to catch up. "There's this section with sculptures," he said. "I think you'd like it." We walked together, the three of us, and I took photos on my phone that I'd actually look at later. Elena pointed out plant names. My son told me about their plans to volunteer at Elena's nonprofit next month. I listened and asked questions and didn't evaluate or judge or question whether it was the right choice. On the way back to the car, my son said, "You should come back in the spring. The gardens are incredible in April." "I'd like that," I said, and meant it. That night, my last night, we ordered pizza and watched something Elena chose. We sat on the same sectional, but this time my son sat in the middle, one cushion from me close enough that our knees almost touched. It wasn't everything. It wasn't fixed. But it was something. Before bed, I packed my bag in the guest room with its hotel basket and its printed Wi-Fi password. Tomorrow I'd fly home to my life, my routines, my world that didn't include daily coffee on the deck or inside jokes about beats. But that was okay. That was how it was supposed to be. He had his life. I had mine. And maybe they could overlap sometimes, gently, honestly, without either of us needing to be more or less than we were. I pulled out my boarding pass on my phone. No SSS this time. Just a regular pass for a regular flight home. In the morning, my son drove me to the airport. Just him. Elena had an early meeting, but she'd hugged me goodbye and made me promise to come back in April. For the gardens, she'd said. And for us. We didn't talk much on the drive. Traffic was light. The sky was that sharp blue you only get after rain. At departures, my son pulled up to the curb and got out to help with my bag. "Thanks for coming," he said. "I know it was weird, but I'm glad you were here." "Me too." He hugged me, 2 arms this time, real and sustained. I held on maybe a second too long, but he didn't pull away. "I'll call you next week," he said. "Like, actually call, not text?" "I'd like that. And maybe I'll come visit you. In the spring or summer. Elena wants to see where I grew up." "You're always welcome," I said. "Both of you." He nodded, stepped back. "Safe flight, Mom." Mom. The word settled over me warm and familiar. I picked up my bag and walked toward the doors, and when I turned back, he was still standing there, watching. He lifted a hand. I lifted mine back. Inside, security was quick. No additional screening, no flags. I found my gate and sat in an uncomfortable chair and pulled out my phone. The text thread with my son was still there, months of one-sided messages and emoji responses. I scrolled to the bottom and typed, "Made it through security. Thanks again for the weekend." "Really?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Him. "Drive safe when you land." And, "Hey, I'm sorry. For all of it. I'm going to do better." Me. "Me too. Love you." 3 dots. Then, him. "Love you too." I stared at those words until they blurred. Put my phone away. Sat there in the airport with its echo of announcements and its smell of coffee and cleaning solution. And I thought about guest rooms and botanical gardens and the long work of rebuilding something you thought you'd lost. The flight was smooth. I slept through most of it. When I landed, the sun was setting, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. I collected my bag and walked out to long-term parking and found my car right where I'd left it. The drive home was familiar, easy, every turn memorized. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked smaller than I remembered. Quieter. I unlocked the door and stepped into the entryway with its console table. And there it was, my boarding pass from 3 days ago, printed and forgotten in my rush to leave. I picked it up. SS marked in red. The thing that had flagged me, delayed me, made me feel suspected and separate. I folded it once, twice, and dropped it in the recycling bin in the kitchen. Then I made myself tea and sat at my table in my house and pulled out my phone. No new messages. But that was okay. He'd said he'd call next week. And I believed him. Or I was choosing to believe him, which was maybe the same thing. Outside, the neighbors' wind chimes rang softly. Inside, the house settled into its evening sounds. And I sat there, not quite sad, not quite happy, just present in the moment, in my life as it actually was, not as I'd wished it to be. It wasn't everything, but it was enough.